Hello, welcome to this special report on Judge Roy Moore of Alabama. The reason this is a special report is we normally do one show a week and we cover the topics of the day in politics. The last episode that we did, we talked about the threat to the Moore campaign. And I said at the time it was going to get rocky, it was going to get nasty, but hang on, we got 3 weeks to go to the election. And I think everybody that lives in Alabama knew it was coming. I think they're supporting Judge Moore, and I think that's great. But I am so disappointed in the national so-called conservative movement that I just couldn't take it. The people that I thought were on board, the people that I thought would stand behind, the people that I thought that knew what was happening are not circling the wagons. Now there is a guy up in the Northeast named Menendez, and he is a member of Congress, and he's on trial for taking girls to somewhere down in the islands and raping them and doing all kinds of nasty things. You don't see the press covering that at all. In fact, I saw a report that the press in one night spent 80 minutes of time smashing Judge Roy Moore and 2 minutes on the Menendez thing. Now, we know that what Menendez did was a fact, okay? What Moore did is accusations. If all that it takes is accusations, then we should get our right-wing papers to go after Mitch McConnell and all the other swamp rats up there. So let me explain to you why I was so disappointed. This week, as I record this, it is Thursday. So on Wednesday, Rush Limbaugh and his program was called out on something by the mainstream media, and he played it, and his comeback, he was bragging that he was being neutral in the Roy Moore deal, that he neither endorsed him nor slammed him. Like that is somehow a good thing. Then I listened to Laura Ingraham. She spent the whole time tiptoeing down a very tight line, and though she said the appropriate phrases, she spent the whole time saying, what if? What if he did it? What if this? And then what? Then she left the picture that she believes the accusations were accurate. Now, first off, let's talk about a little bit of the specifics. There have been 5 women so far that I know of, or maybe 6. 4 of them you can get rid of because they mean absolutely nothing. The only one that involves criminal action is the one that stood up, gave the press conference and cried, remember? After she did that, her stepson came out, made a video on YouTube and said, yeah, I've known her for a long time and I don't believe a word she said. She's a liar. Then it came out later that same day that the attorney for Judge Roy Moore came out and said, yeah, that's the same lady that was in Judge Moore's courtroom for a divorce and she lost. So you think that might be a little slanted? Now, the reason that they are dripping these out one at a time so they can get maximum coverage. And just because, even if they trot 20 of these women out, is that going to make him more guilty? And remember, the things that they're accusing him of is not guilt. It might be a little creepy if it happened. I mean, a 35-year-old dating a 16-year-old. But now remember, in Alabama, the right of consent is the age of 16. People in Alabama, if you don't like that, if you think that's wrong, then raise the age. But that is the legal age of consent at 16. So any of these women that say anything that happened after the age of 16, they're on their own, unless it's rape. If it's under the age of 15, now we've got an issue. But again, it's all accusations. What happened to innocent before proven guilty? It amazed me this week, the blatancy that the Republicans in the House came out and immediately took sides. Mitch McConnell came down and said, yeah, I believe the women, he needs to step down. Okay, first off, who died and left him? God. Who left him in charge of who's right and who's wrong? You are temporarily a Senate Majority Leader. You are not a judge, nor a jury, nor an executioner. Now we're going to get back to Mitch in just a minute. Now, and here's the biggest betrayal of all, and we're going to get to this in one of the articles. Judge Roy Moore has been dropped by the Republican National Committee. That means he gets no money. Now, Mitch McConnell, in an article in a little while, is going to say that Roy Moore's campaign is falling apart. And it may very well be falling apart, but he caused it. He's dropping the money. Now, money does not win elections, and Judge Moore knows that. They outspent him 15-1 in the last election, and he kicked his rear end. The difference, the thing that aggravates me the most is this. The Republicans should be circling the wagons around Moore to protect him, and yet what they're doing is holding him up so that every arrow hits. They're using him as bait. So why would they be doing this? Remember, Mitch McConnell is the one that endorsed Moore's opponent in the election, Strange. So now, and Mitch McConnell represents the swamp and all the swamp rats. Now, if you want to know who's in the swamp, you go back for the last 3 or 4 days, and you look at all of the Republicans that came out and said he should step down. Every one of those Republicans are swamp rats. Now, you ask why. I've been preaching on this for years. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party, as we were raised to understand it, is dead. We still have two parties, but that's not Republican and Democrat. It's establishment and Tea Party. Judge Roy Moore and his politics represent the Tea Party, and the establishment hates that. Reference in the last election, they were both Republicans running. Remember Strange and Moore? The Republican National Committee spent almost $15 million to get rid of Moore and bring in Strange. So now he wins the seat, and now the Republican establishment, the Republican National Committee dropped him. The swamp rats want him to quit, and they're spreading rumors about what they're going to do even if he wins. Do you notice a similarity between how they're treating him and the way they've been treating Trump? Ever since the day Trump got elected, the swamp has been trying to get rid of him. They have hounded him. They have lied about him. They have got a special prosecutor. They harass him on an hourly basis. Why? Because he's not the swamp. They can't control him, and Roy Moore is the exact same. The establishment can't control him, and Judge Moore will not kowtow to Mitch McConnell and the swamp. And that's why they're going after him. They don't care that he's Republican or Democrat. What matters is the swamp. And that's why the Republicans cut off. Now, think about this. There's a two-person race. There's a two-person race, Republican and Democrat, right? Why do you think that the Republicans would go down and spend money to defeat their own candidate? Think about that. If it's about Republicans and Democrats, the Republicans ought to be dumping money in there to win the seat, and yet they're doing the opposite. There's a reason for that. Instead of helping him, they pulled his money. Instead of circling the wagons around more to protect him, they're crucifying him. And instead of the so-called conservative movement in the press at least defending him, they're bragging about being neutral. I'm not neutral. I don't care about what the press is talking about as far as Moore goes. Here's what I know, and I'm not even from Alabama. Judge Moore has been the Supreme Court leader in Alabama twice. He has upheld Christian Judeo values. He has been squeaky clean for 40 years. The people in Alabama know Judge Roy Moore. His politics are conservative. His values are Christian. His attitude and help for everybody outside of the women who are accusing him have nothing but nice things to say about him. He's a gentleman. He's a Southern gentleman. And he has values. So when the liberal press, from the Washington Post no less, I mean, you don't get any more liberal than that, starts throwing accusations around, and the rest of the press, which is also liberal, starts feeding off of it like a bunch of piranhas, and they start echoing each other, that's going to take a toll. And I am so aggravated at the mainstream, or at the so-called conservative movement. Rush Limbaugh should not be bragging about being neutral. Him and Laura Ingraham are so worried about their reputations of associating with a sexual predator that they are not willing to stand up and talk about what they're supposed to be talking about. They are neither judge nor executioner either. They are there to talk about politics, and I'm going to talk about politics. Judge Roy Moore is what we need. Judge Roy Moore is who the people of Alabama elected, and we should do everything we can to see that he gets elected, period, end of conversation. Okay, so now let's address, just for the sake of argument, let's address these women, okay? As I said, out of the 5 or 6 that are there, you can discount 4 or 5 of them because they were all legal. There was no rape, there was no anything. And at the very worst, there was inappropriate groping. And if you are a male, I'm sure you've done that at some point in your life. And if you're a female, I'm sure you've had that done to you at some point in your life. That does not equal a sexual predator. All right? Now, between now and the election, nothing's going to be done. And that's the whole timing of this. They don't want it fixed. They don't want it checked out. They don't want any fixes. All they want to do is keep Roy Moore out. Now, no matter which way this goes, the election, I promise you one thing. 3 months after the election, these women are all going to go away. And there's not going to be anything happen unless Roy Moore sues. And I hope he does. But let's assume that Judge Moore wins. Okay? And he takes his place in the Senate and things goes on. I do believe that any of these women that are still standing, there should be an investigation. And I agree. If he's guilty, then I think he should be investigated and proven in a court of law, not in the court of public opinion, not in the court of the swamp, but in a court of law. And if you can prove it, great. If not, shut up and go home. And let's get down to running the country. Now, I want to ratchet down the rhetoric by comparing and contrasting. What we have against Roy Moore are accusations, right, by women that have spotty reputations at best. One of them has been convicted of writing bad checks. One of them lost a divorce suit in Judge Roy Moore's court. Another one lied about the date that it was. It's on and on and on. It's all about accusations. Let's talk about some of the people in the swamp that we have facts on and have had for years and still no satisfaction. And the press isn't saying anything. We start with the queen of mean, the queen of scandal, the soulless Hillary. What about the email scandal? That was the biggest cover-up I ever saw. Comey's guilty. Loretta Lynch is guilty. The Justice Department swamp is guilty. And we all know it. And Comey proved it. He proved the whole case in front of that committee. And then at the end, instead of saying guilty, he said innocent. Unbelievable. The uranium deal. They are finally talking about putting together an investigation. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen here, just in my opinion. They're going to talk this thing to death. They're going to get a wuss as a special counsel who's going to soft pedal around. And when he goes to get information, he's going to get nothing from the Justice Department. They are going to fight for years over this. And it ends up nothing will be done. Same with the emails. The fact of the matter is 20% of our uranium reserves are under the control of the Russians. That is a fact. And that fact happened because of Hillary Clinton. Now, you could call it whatever you want to call it. I call it treason. Let's take out the word uranium and let's put in the word battleships. What if 20% of our battleships were under the control of the Russians? Would that be treason? What if we change the word uranium to troops? If 20% of our troops were under the control of the Russians and Hillary was responsible, would that be treason? What if we take out the word uranium and we put in armor? What if 20% of our armor divisions in the military were under the control of the Russians and Hillary was responsible for making that happen? Would that be treason? So why is it not treason that they get 20% of our uranium reserves controlled by the Russians and Hillary is responsible? Now, in case you don't know, uranium is used and needed to make nuclear weapons. We are not self-sufficient in our uranium. We need to import 1/3 of all the uranium we need. And of the uranium that we do have, she gave away 20%. So now instead of importing about 1/3, we're going to start needing to import about half. And guess who's going to control the majority of it? The Russians. I call that treason. And yet, there's not going to be anything happen with that. What about the pay to play? We know that happened. We know that Bill Clinton received $500,000 speaking fees twice. Once from Russia, once from some little country over there that was used to manipulate the progress of the Uranium One deal. We know that to be a fact. We know that that Canadian company donated over $140 million to the Clinton Foundation as Hillary was having that approved in her committee. Those are felonies. That's bribery. And here's the thing. While that was going on, Bob Mueller and Rosenstein and Comey all knew that there was an investigation going on into bribery in the government, and they knew all about this, and they never said a word. They are complicit. We know this to be true. We know this to be a fact. This is not hearsay. And yet, Mueller continues to go after Trump as a special prosecutor. Rosenstein remains number 2 in the Justice Department. And Comey signs a multi-million-dollar book deal for committing felonies as the head of the FBI. And nothing happens. It gets a lot of chatter. It gets, every once in a while, it gets mentioned. And people go talk in front of committees, but nothing happens. They're still walking free. If that was me and you, they'd have us in shackles in prison awaiting trial. What about Hillary taking over the Democratic National Committee? Before the election, while she was still running against Bernie, she controlled everything that went on in the Democratic National Committee. That's a felony. You can't do that. That breaks by election law rules. And yes, she walks away, and everybody knows it's true. There's no question at all. There are signed documents, signed agreements that prove that. And the Podesta boys were in on that. Obama was in on it. Hillary was in on it. Debbie, what's-her-name, Schultz was in on it. And still, nobody's being prosecuted. The swamp is covering Hillary. Okay, we've talked enough about Hillary. Let's talk about Bob Mueller, another swamp rat. As I said earlier, he was responsible for the he was ex-head of the FBI, and he knew about the investigation into bribery, and he knew about Hillary and the Clinton Foundation and the guy in Canada and the uranium deal, and he never said a word. As the special prosecutor, Bob Mueller used Gestapo methods for Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort was supposed to go testify that day, and at a pre-dawn raid on Manafort's house, they used Gestapo methods by busting in the door, guns drawn, in front of his family. Had that been a Republican prosecutor doing that to a Democrat, all hell would have broke loose. And yet, Bob Mueller, no consequences. Paul Manafort is now the one up on charges. The swamp is going to allow Bob Mueller to get away with anything he wants to justify his existence, because their ultimate goal, to the ruination of our government, is to get Donald Trump. So they don't care what he does. He could go kill somebody, and they would justify it and just say, that's okay, Bob, you made a mistake, go get Trump. That to me is evil. And Bob Mueller was assigned that job by Rosenstein, the number 2 man right now at the head of the Justice Department, another swamp rat. All right, let's talk about Comey. Comey falsified memos about conversations he had with Donald Trump. He gave them to a friend who would release them to the press, and he admitted that in court under oath. And he did it for the sole purpose of getting a special prosecutor to go after Trump. This is all fact. This is all in the record. This is all said by Comey under oath in front of the committee. That's a member of the swamp admitting to felonies, admitting to screwing the system as a personal vendetta against Trump, who is not part of the swamp. And guess what? He's still walking free a year later. There's barely a whisper about going after him. He's signed a multi-year or a multi-million-dollar contract to write a book, and he's walking free, and he's committed felonies, and we know that. Has Judge Roy Moore committed a felony that we know of? No. Has he done anything that is prosecutable that we know of? No. Has he admitted to anything? No. Do we have any proof at all other than he said, she said? No. Comey used what I call the P file, that fake, phony, made up dossier by an ex-MI6 agent. And that file, which was totally made up, no proof at all, they have used that file as the basis for everything that's happened. The basis for going after Trump, the basis for unmasking in those wiretaps, the basis for getting the wiretaps, the basis for getting Bob Mueller, the basis for going after Manafort, the basis for everything that the Democrats in the swamp have done has been based on a phony, made up, unproven dossier. And I don't even like the word dossier. It gives it kind of a mysterious sound. It's a file. It's a P file. What does the letter P mean? Well, if you know anything about the dossier, it says that Trump hired prostitutes to come pee on the bed. And rather than call it anything else, I'm just going to call it the P file. You can use a capital letter P or the word P, but it's the P file. It's phony. It's all made up. They offered that MI6 agent a lot of money to prove just one thing. He couldn't prove it. Now, he tried to manipulate some things to get the proof, but as soon as it was looked into, it crumbled like a cheap suit. Let's talk about Bill Clinton. What about all of those women? All of those women. Those were facts. Those were not allegations. Bill Clinton was impeached. Remember that. Bill Clinton lost his law license. Remember that. And it was all because of these women. We know this to be fact, and yet he's walking around free. If you and I had been convicted of just one of those, we would be sitting in prison till hell froze over. And yet Clinton walks free. Why? Because he is a swamp rat. Bill Clinton, even though we know for a fact that he molested and raped these women, we know that to be a fact, has gotten a free pass from the press. A free pass. Judge Roy Moore, who we know nothing about facts, all we know is people are accusing him in a contentious race by females of various backgrounds with obvious motives, and yet the press is riding him like a cheap horse. Bill Clinton has had no consequences other than being married to Hillary. Has had no consequences for his actions. He has abused women. He has raped women. He has groped women. He has done every possible thing you can do to a female, and he's had no consequences, and the press has given him a free pass. And then when he was caught, he lied to the Congress. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Well, if you define sexual relations by intercourse, he was probably right. And the whole press was going to let him go until she produced the famous blue dress. And when she produced the dress and they had it analyzed, guess what? It was Bill. And he still got a free pass. They had physical proof, not just her word, but physical proof. We know that they've paid off women. We know that they've destroyed women. We know that they have done character assassinations on women. And still, he has no consequences. Judge Roy Moore's done nothing except being accused. And Judge Roy Moore is getting all the consequences. So all I'm asking, all I'm saying, and all I'm wanting our Republican friends to do is to remember this. Between now and the election, this is about an election. This is not about legality. This is not about did he or didn't he. This is not about anything. This is a dirty political trick being done by the left wing, Washington Post, perpetuated by the left wing, mainstream media, with no proof, no background, except what the press tells us is true. We need, as a conservative movement, and I'm talking to you, Rush Limbaugh, and I'm talking to you, Laura Ingraham, and I'm talking to, I can't think of that guy's name on Fox. As a general rule, I like him, but he's vacillating. I will say this. I want to give props to Steve Bannon. He's the only one that is standing by Roy Moore, and the press is now starting to crucify him. We always get upset when the Democrats circle their wagons around their perverts. And we yell and scream. But you know what? They survived. Look at Bill Clinton. Look at Hillary Clinton. Look at Comey. Look at Bob Mueller. Look at Rosenstein. They circle the wagons and their people survive. Rush Limbaugh and Laura Ingraham, you always say we should take a page from the Democrats' playbook and support our own and stop sacrificing them and throwing them on the altar of expediency. Well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Circle the wagons, protect Roy Moore. Now, if he gets in there and we find proof and he's convicted, then I will be the first one to lead the charge of booting him the hell out of Congress. But until then, this is about an election. This is about winning an election. You want to change things? You want to clean the swamp? You want to get another vote for the wall? You want to repeal Obamacare? You want to pass a tax cut? You want to get those things done? Then we need to win elections. That's what the Democrats do. And they're hailed as heroes. Stop pussyfooting. Stop trying to walk the fine line that we are made to feel like we have to walk. The Democrats don't walk it. The liberal press doesn't walk it. The establishment doesn't walk it. But we, as conservative Republicans, we are expected to walk that fine line. And I say, no. This is about an election. This is about winning. This is about doing what needs to be done to take our government back from the swamp. And the swamp is not going to go down without a fight. This is dirty pool. This is a bad move. And they're dumping on a guy that does not have the money to fight back, or the willpower, or the wherewithal to fight the big machine. So instead of holding him out as bait for the sharks to eat up, Laura Ingraham, Rush Limbaugh, why don't you start putting your money where your mouth is and backing up a good, loyal conservative. So, okay, so you're afraid that somewhere down the road he's going to be proven to be a pervert. Okay, they'll be the first one in line to kick him the hell out of Congress. But until then, concentrate on winning an election and stop worrying about it hurting you. I am so sick and tired of the double standard between conservative Christian Republicans and the rest of the swamp. It's okay for Menendez to take girls down to whatever island it is and rape them and sodomize them and steal money and all kinds of things. That's okay, and nobody's going to talk about it, and he's still in Congress, for God's sakes. But we get a conservative Christian Republican from the state of Alabama, and all of a sudden it's okay to absolutely crucify this man. And you guys, Limbaugh and Ingram, either turn your back or claim to be neutral. That's the biggest line of hooey I've ever heard. Circle the wagons, protect this man, and get him elected. Now, here's the agreement I will make. I will jump on board with defeating him as soon as the 4 people I talked about earlier, as soon as justice is dealt to them. Why should we have justice for us and justice for the elite? It's completely different. Why is that okay? We need to stand up and demand that Hillary and Bill Clinton, James Comey, Bob Mueller, Rosenstein, and the rest of the swamp rats that are guilty in any of this, let's pull that scab off and prosecute them. And as soon as that happens, then we can go after these ghosts that the press has created to try to tarnish the reputation of a good Christian man. Now, to back up my thing, I want to go over a couple of articles that I saw the other day in the paper, and I want to show you how what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. Here's in the op-ed page, the title of it is called The Roy Moore Mess. Now, in this op-ed piece, this is written by a Wall Street Journal writer, okay? And it's a long article, and I'm not going to go over it, but I do want to pull some things out of this. It says, the sensible move would be for Mr. Moore to step away from the campaign and allow Alabama's Republicans to put forth a more credible candidate to run as a write-in against Democrat Doug Jones. Most likely, Mr. Moore won't do that. He made his reputation as an Alabama state judge by openly defying valid court orders, which twice cost him his court seat. Okay, let me rephrase that. What he's saying is, based on accusations of women of questionable backgrounds, the smart thing to do, because there's a lot of mud being slung, Mr. Conservative Moore, would be for you to step away and let's put Strange back in there so that we can build the swamp back up. But you're not going to do that because you're a maverick. You go against valid court orders. Well, let's talk about those valid court orders. One of them was to remove the 10 Commandments from his courtroom. I don't call that defying. I call that putting God's law above man's law, and he paid his consequences. He did the right thing. This guy's done the wrong thing. The other one was homosexual marriage. He told the Supreme Court that they had no right to make his people in his state do to go against their beliefs of doing homosexual marriage. And they removed him from court. I don't call that defying. I call that honoring God's law and not man's law. But you can see where this guy's coming from. There is no other obvious loser in this debacle. Former White House aide Steve Bannon. Some have argued that the Bannon insurgency against the Republican establishment are part of your challenges to Ronald Reagan and Newt Gingrich. This one isn't close. The populism of Reagan and Gingrich was always about building the conservative movement into a majority that could govern and change the country. The Bannonites have given no evidence or argument that they are aiming that high. They want to defeat the existing majority, a conservative majority, by any historical standard, mainly to show that they can depose Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. That proves this guy has no idea what's going on. These guys, so he says that the Republicans that are in now, by any stretch of the imagination, is conservative. Really? Okay, let's talk about that. The conservatives for 8 years under Obama would pass this for 7 years, said, we want to repeal Obamacare, because that's the conservative Republican mantra. And every year they would pass it unanimously. The first time they get the opportunity to do that under Trump, they back down like a bunch of little girls. They're not conservative, they're rhinos. They are establishment. This guy has no clue. And Steve Bannon is stepping in and saying, hey, Republican and Democrat doesn't matter. Let's get rid of the establishment and let's bring in the Tea Party. This is the only guy that I see that is saying the things I've been saying for a couple of years now. It's not Democrat versus Republican. It's establishment versus Tea Party. And Steve Bannon is going out and doing exactly that. He is picking Tea Party candidates to go up against these establishment rhinos. And this guy is saying, oh, he has no goals. All he wants to do is get rid of Mitch McConnell. Well, we do need to get rid of Mitch McConnell, but not because he's Republican, but because he's a swamp rat. And he is against everything that Trump stands for. That's why he needs to go. Raging against the establishment for the sake of raging is an agenda for losers, and it will cost conservatives the votes in Congress they need to achieve conservative goals. No, I disagree. In the upcoming election, we're going to get rid of 2, maybe 3 swamp rats for sure. We're going to get rid of Strange. Hopefully we're going to get more in there. We're going to get Bob Corker. They've already got a female conservative running up there. She's going to win that seat. We're going to get rid of Flake in Arizona, and they've already got a female up there that they're backing, and I've seen her. She's good. She's going to win that seat. That's 3 establishment Republicans that we're going to get rid of and put in Tea Party. When those dominoes, and they're already falling, and the rest of the swamp rats see that, we're going to see more people back out or not fight. They understand exactly what's happening. It's the press. If they understand it, they're lying to the American people. And if they don't understand it, it's because they still don't understand what's going on in the politics. The politics of it is, it's not and hasn't been about Republican and Democrats for years. It is about establishment, the insiders against the outsiders. And the outsiders are the Tea Party. Now, and I want you, I've said this for years. I read an article, I don't remember, but they said the winning coalition, and they went down a bunch of them, gays and women under 50 and blacks and Hispanics and all, and they go and they say, this is how you win. Put these coalitions together. We as conservatives don't think like that. We don't think about how to win. When Republicans win, when conservatives win, we win on ideas and ideals. Just because you're black does not mean you are not a Tea Party believer. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you believe in fiscal conservative, cutting spending, building the wall, getting rid of Obamacare, smaller government, if you believe in those things, you're a conservative. It's not about going after a certain group. The Democrats don't have beliefs. They have a method to win, and that's what aggravates me about the conservatives. Instead of following what we know to be true, that we know that wins, is beliefs and ideals, they're getting all caught up in perception. They are falling right into the trap that the liberals have set. The divide and conquer. They're trying to separate more from the conservatives. And people like Rush Limbaugh and Laura Ingraham have fallen right into that trap, and I applaud Steve Bannon. He's the only one that I've seen that has not fallen into that trap and is not going to fall into that trap because he has beliefs. He is operating from a space of ideals and beliefs and he's a true believer. I'm with Steve Bannon. Now the next article is called Party Seeks to Salvage More Seat. That's the first part I want to read. It says, Republicans seeking to fend off the first Senate Democratic victory in Alabama in decades are grasping for ways to derail their nominee. Why are they seeking ways to derail their nominee? Roy Moore, whose campaign has been engulfed in allegations of sexual misconduct. And the key word there is allegations. President Donald Trump spoke on the phone from Vietnam with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and discussed how to manage the exit, the senator said. Mr. Mitch McConnell, who has been spearheading the effort to get rid of Mr. Moore, said Tuesday. He wants Attorney Jeff Sessions to reclaim the seat. Now think about that for a second. Jeff Sessions, who by the way is a swamp rat, left the seat to go head the Justice Department. All right. Mitch McConnell, who is also a swamp rat, thinks the way to get this seat to stay Republican and get rid of a conservative is to have Sessions give up the head of the Justice Department and go back to being a senator. Can you see how desperate they are? These swamp rats will do anything to keep conservatives out of there. He's asking the head of the Justice Department to step down and go reclaim his seat, which first off, I don't even know if that's possible. But the fact that that is even considered is absolutely insane. And they're floating other ideas. One is that the governor of Alabama could postpone the date and then pull more from the campaign and put in another conservative candidate. I don't know that that's legal either. But that's not stopping the swamp rats. They don't care about legal or illegal. They care about what they want. As Mr. McConnell and others spoke openly of blocking him, Mr. Moore sent a message on Twitter. The good people of Alabama, not the Washington elite who wallow in the swamp, will decide this election. Hashtag ditch Mitch. Good for you. Good for you, Judge. Later, he tweeted, Mitch McConnell's days as majority leader are coming to an end very soon. The fight has just begun. And that's what we need to do. That's why we need Judge Roy Moore in there. Mitch McConnell says his campaign is collapsing. Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell said. Yeah, it's collapsing because you had the Republican National Committee cut off all of his funding. Not because the people are against him. Not because he's losing the election, but because you cut off his financing. Even if Mr. Moore wins, GOP leaders worry that having him in the Senate will be a political liability for all Republicans up for re-election in 2018. And how is that? You mean for all the swamp rats? For the Tea Party candidates that are up, not going to hurt them at all. It's going to hurt the swamp rats because now they're going to have to go out and defend it. But the conservatives who have ideas and ideals are not going to be swayed by garbage from the swamp. And you, Mitch McConnell, are a swamp rat. You are worried about your swamp. You want Strange back in there. You want one of your boys in there. Well, Judge Roy Moore ain't your boy. So you're willing to do whatever it is, legal or illegal, to get him out. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if you had something to do with that article from the Washington Post. You are a slimy, no good, good for nothing, lousy Senate leader. You are anti-Trump, anti-American, and anti-conservative. You need to go. And Roy Moore sees that. And Steve Bannon sees that. We as conservatives see that. And all this smoke and mirrors that you're doing going to threaten Republicans in the upcoming election? I don't think so. And issues or allegations reported by the Washington Post last week that Mr. Moore, when he was in his early 30s, had initiated relationships with 4 teenagers, including sexual advances made on one girl who was 14. Okay, let's look at that. Washington Post, ultra left wing. Allegations is the key phrase there. When he was in his 30s, initiated relationships with 4 teenagers. As I said earlier, whether you find that creepy or not, it was legal. The legal age of consent in Tennessee is 16. And by the way, let me remind you that Roy Moore said he never dated anybody who he did not get the permission of their mom. That is a Southern tradition. I believe that to be true. Now, the girl that was 14, if that turns out to be true, then go after it. I think that was the one that was accused of and convicted of writing bad checks. To me, that whole story does not ring true. And the one that got on TV and did the press conference and cried, she's the one whose stepson came out and said, no, she's a liar. And the judge and Judge Roy Moore's attorney said, yeah, she's the one that lost her divorce case in front of Judge Roy Moore. You think there might be a little bit of an axe there to grind? I don't believe her either. So Mitch McConnell, I don't care who you believe. I don't care what you think. For you to act like you are God, judge, jury, and executioner proves your arrogance. How dare you? Somebody needs to start holding you accountable. Now we're going to talk about the Democrat here. Mr. Jones is well known in the civil rights community for having prosecuted Ku Klux Klan members for the 1963 Birmingham church bombing that killed 3 girls. He has been endorsed by civil rights icon Republican John Lewis, Republican of Georgia, who campaigned with Mr. Jones last week. Well, those of us that are conservative, that's enough right there to not vote for this guy. He's endorsed by the civil rights guy from Georgia. Really? Civil rights is a non-issue. That was an issue in the 60s and 70s, and we fought that battle, and that battle is done. The only reason that's even an issue is because the last administration used these types of policies to divide and conquer the American people. And it's time that we as Americans put that garbage behind us, realize that where that came from was the swamp, and we need to relegate that back to the swamp of where it was. We as Americans know that it does not matter the color of your skin, the type of your religion, your sexual orientation. We all understand that. We know that. It's these bozos who keep throwing it in everybody's face, and every time it starts to heal, they peel the scab off and throw accusations around. We're talking about Judge Moore, the accusations of females, and still in this article, they managed to throw in civil rights and black girls being killed, and he's a champion. That type of manipulation is garbage. So let's talk about what we can do. In conclusion, if the swamp rats and the Democrats don't want him, we need him. Let the legal system answer charges and take any action then. Why should he have to pay consequences without a conviction? We're going to let him be convicted by the Washington Post and the swamp? That's garbage. Now, for those of you that watch this, I want you to not pay close attention. This is important. Do not send money at any time in the future to the Republican National Committee. Don't do it. Because in this election was a prime example of what they're doing with that money. They spent 15 million of your donated dollars, 15 million, to put a swamp rat back in the swamp and to get rid of a good Christian conservative man who used to be judge. Is that how you want your donations spent? That's how they're spending it. You may as well send it to the Democratic National Committee. If you want to donate and you want to help drain the swamp, send your money to Judge Roy Moore, to his campaign personally. Now, it'll take an extra second for you to Google Judge Roy Moore campaign fund and where to mail it to or to email it or however you do it, but do it directly to him. Let him spend the money to get himself elected, because it's obvious the press is not going to help him. The Republican National Committee is not going to help him. The Republican leadership is not going to help him. Mitch McConnell is not going to help him. The only people he's got to help him is we the people. Cut the money off from the Republican National Committee. As soon as we cut that money, they will lose their authority and their power. They'll stop spending $15 million on a Senate seat from Alabama. Send your money directly, and not just in this race, but from all the way through from now on. As an example, there's a female, I can't remember her name, in Tennessee. If you want to see a conservative take over Bob Corker's seat, find out her name and send her the money directly. Same with the female out in Arizona. We're going to get rid of Flake. Find out what, and in today's technology, all you got to do is Google in, who's taking Flake's place in Arizona. Then click on her name, find out her campaign, and send them a check. But we need to start changing the way that we donate money. Do not donate to the Republican National Committee. Now, their argument has always been, because of the way the finance laws are, that you can donate more by dividing up how you spend it. To which I say, don't worry about it. I would rather have Judge Roy Moore have 5 million from individual donors who are believers than 105 million from somebody he's beholden to at the Republican National Committee. And that even assumes that he'd even get the money. The Republican, so let's say you donate all that, for those of you that have a lot of money and want to donate a lot, instead of donating it to the Republican National Committee, how about picking 50 races and donating the maximum to each one? There's other ways to donate money than to the Republican National Committee. Because if you're doing that, what you're doing in effect is donating to the Democratic National Committee. It is imperative that we as conservative Republicans see this with a clear vision. And we keep in mind that it is not up to us to determine guilt, nor is it up to the press, nor is it up to the Republican leadership, nor is it up to the Senate. It is up to a court. What is up to us is winning an election, and we need to keep our eyes focused right on that. Keep your eye focused on the ball. You know, I always teach about the shiny ball. Keep your eye on the shiny ball and don't worry about all the nasty tricks I'm doing over here to kill you. You know, I killed 59 people out in Las Vegas, but let's talk about Hillary Clinton. I'm really going after Judge Roy Moore down in Alabama, but let's talk about the females and what he might have done. Take your eyes off of the shiny ball and keep your eye on the real ball, and that is winning this election. Now, I did this special report because I think it is imperative that somebody stand up and encourage Judge Roy Moore, that they encourage the people of Alabama, that they encourage conservatives around the country. It is time to take a stand and stop being manipulated. And I'll tell you the truth, I hope Roy Moore does sue the Washington Post. Just like the P-file, the special prosecutor, James Comey, that whole mess, the unmasking, everything associated has all been based on unproven, made up garbage. And everybody knows it in the swamp, but they're still using it as a justification to do that. Just like everybody at the Washington Post and everybody in the mainstream media and everybody in the swamp knows that these charges are trumped up, no pun intended. But yet they're going to ride that horse as a chance to get rid of a conservative and bring in another swamp rat. We, the people, have to stand up and make sure that that doesn't happen. And we need to encourage Roy Moore. What Roy Moore is going through now is what Trump has gone through every day for the last year. And the sad news is that conservatives, and especially Christian conservatives, are going to go through this type of harassment and negative press every time we win. But, and here's the secret, the more we win, the less each one of us has to endure. If they only have 2 people to pick on, they can spend a half a day on each one. But if we have 50 that win, then each one of us only has to put up with 10 minutes a day. If we get 300, then each one of us will get 10 minutes a week. You see what I'm saying? So we need to encourage Judge Roy Moore. Call him, write him, text him, support him with your money, campaign for him. Do whatever it is you can to support him. We've got 3 or 4 weeks to go before this election. Let's help him run. Let's finish the race strong. Be encouraged. Know that God is in charge, not the swamp. We will come back. We'll do our normal program on Sunday. I just wanted to take the time today to encourage, to point out the hypocrisy, to bring an update, and to help everybody to keep our eyes on the ball, the real ball, and that is winning this election. Well, you guys be blessed, and I hope that this made a difference to somebody, and I look forward to next week when we sit down and talk about this week in politics.